The air in the old family home felt heavier than usual, thick with unspoken words and memories, the scent of worn leather, bound books, and faint traces of Dad's aftershave lingering in every corner. I sat quietly in the living room, my fingers nervously tracing the grain of the polished wooden table. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. Today was Dad's birthday, but there was no laughter, no celebration, just a gathering cloud of tension and bitterness. Across the room, my brother James lounged in his usual arrogant way, a mocking smirk playing on his lips as he glanced toward me. "You really think Dad's going to leave you anything?" He sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're dreaming if you believe you'll get the house or the business. It's all mine. I'm the one who's been here, running things, making connections. You're just standing in the way." His words hit me like a slap, sharp, cold, and cruel. The other family members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, unwilling to intervene. Dad, frail and weak from his illness, lay resting upstairs, oblivious or perhaps too tired to intervene. The house that once felt like a warm refuge now felt like a battlefield. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, to shout back that I wasn't some naive child waiting for handouts. But the lump in my throat was too big, and my voice too small. Instead, I sat there in silence, swallowing the bitter taste of betrayal. Growing up, James had always been the golden boy, the confident, loud, and assertive one. While I was quieter, more reserved, he thrived on attention, always the center of every room. But beneath his bravado, I'd always sensed a ruthless streak, a hunger for control that scared me. Now it was laid bare in his mocking words. "It's not about what you deserve," James continued, pacing the room as if he owned it already. "It's about who's going to take what's rightfully theirs. And let me remind you, the house and Dad's business, that's mine. I've put in the work. I've been there day and night. You're just the leftover." The sting of his insult was unbearable. My mind flashed back to the countless nights I had stayed up with Dad, helping him balance the books, listening to his dreams for the future of the family business. I remembered the quiet conversations, the lessons he taught me about resilience, patience, and integrity. Did James know nothing of those moments, or did he choose to ignore them? "James," I finally whispered, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "This isn't about who's been louder or who's been seen. It's about what Dad wants. And I'm going to find out exactly that." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Good luck with that. The lawyers already told me everything's set in stone. You won't get a thing." His words stung, but something inside me sparked. A flicker of determination. I wasn't going to let his arrogance crush me. I wouldn't be the sibling who bowed down quietly. I would fight, not with anger, but with truth. Later that evening, after the family had dispersed and the house was silent, I sat alone by the window, looking out at the darkening sky. The weight of the day pressed down on me, but beneath it, a new strength was growing. I promised myself then that I would uncover the truth about Dad's wishes, no matter what it took. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't shouting back, it's proving them wrong when they least expect it. The next morning dawned with a pale light filtering through the curtains, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. I sat at the kitchen table, the cold cup of coffee before me forgotten as my mind raced. James's mocking words from last night still echoed, but beneath the anger, a seed of determination had taken root. The key to this entire mess was the family lawyer, Mr. Whitman, a man I'd only met a handful of times, always in the presence of Dad or James. If there was any hope of understanding what Dad truly wanted, it was with him. I called his office first thing, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. "I'd like to come by and review some documents regarding Dad's will," I said, careful not to reveal too much. There was a pause on the other end, a subtle hesitation. "Very well," he replied, his tone professional but guarded. "Come by this afternoon." All day, my thoughts circled around what I might find. Had Dad really left everything to James, as my brother claimed, or had he quietly prepared for this moment in a way none of us expected? When I arrived at the law office, the familiar scent of leather, bound files and polished wood greeted me. Mr. Whitman was waiting in his cluttered study, his expression unreadable behind thin, rimmed glasses. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. He opened a large, embossed envelope and pulled out several documents. Your father was very particular, he began. He made sure to protect the business and the family home in a way that might surprise you. I leaned forward, heart pounding. There are specific clauses in the will that designate the house and the business not to be handed over automatically to your brother. Instead, Dad created a trust, one that protects these assets until certain conditions are met. I frowned. Conditions? Mr. Whitman nodded. Yes, he wanted to ensure the business stayed in hands that respected his vision. And the house was to be preserved for the person who showed dedication, integrity, and responsibility, not just bloodline. My mind raced back to the late nights I'd spent with Dad, the lessons he'd shared quietly when James wasn't around. Had he been preparing me all along? But James didn't know this, I asked. No, your father wanted to avoid family conflict, but your brother's behavior may change things. The lawyer who drafted this made sure it was airtight. Miss Sturt. Whitman slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were letters from Dad, notes I'd never seen, expressing his faith in me and his concerns about the future of the family legacy. A lump rose in my throat. For years, I had felt invisible next to James's loud presence. But here, in these words, was proof that Dad had believed in me all along. I left the office feeling a strange mixture of relief and renewed purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. James wouldn't give up without a fight. But now, I had the truth. I had Dad's plans. And most importantly, I had a quiet strength growing inside me. The real battle was only just beginning. The moment I stepped back into the family home, the atmosphere felt charged, as if the walls themselves had sensed the shift in power. James was waiting for me in the foyer, his eyes narrowing the second they landed on me. He had that same smug grin, but this time, there was a flicker of uncertainty behind it. So, he said, voice dripping with false warmth, I hear you've been talking to the lawyer. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to let him see the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I have. And I know exactly what Dad wanted. For a brief second, the mask slipped, his arrogance faltered, replaced by a flash of something darker, fear, maybe, or frustration. You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine? He hissed. Dad never told you that. It's not your place. It is my place, I said firmly. Because I'm going to protect what he built. I'm going to honor his legacy, not trample it for my own gain. From that day forward, the house became a battleground, not with raised voices or physical fights, but with strategy, patience, and subtle moves. I reached out quietly to those who had been loyal to Dad for years. The longtime employees who knew the business inside and out, the family friends who had always respected my quieter presence. Some were surprised, others cautious. But slowly, alliances formed. They saw in me what James refused to admit, a commitment to the future, not just a hunger for power. Meanwhile, James tried everything he could think of. He spread rumors, tried to sway relatives to his side, and even attempted to bully me into giving up. But I held my ground, letting his arrogance be his undoing. The more he lashed out, the more people began to see his true nature, entitled, reckless, and unworthy of the trust Dad had placed. Yet, the hardest part wasn't fighting James or gathering allies. It was the quiet moments when I questioned myself. Was I becoming the person I despised? Was this battle worth the fractures it created in what was left of our family? Every time doubt crept in, I remembered Dad's words, the letters from the lawyer's office, and the vision he had entrusted me with. This wasn't just about property or business. It was about protecting a legacy of integrity and love. And so I moved forward, patient and relentless. The final chapter was approaching, and I was ready to face it, with strength, grace, and the truth on my side. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm gathering on the horizon, tense, charged, impossible to ignore. The courthouse felt cold and impersonal, but to me, it was the place where justice would finally be served. James was already there, radiating his usual confidence, though I caught the slightest tremor in his hands as he clenched them at his sides. The courtroom filled with familiar faces, family members, employees, friends, everyone waiting to see how this long, painful struggle would end. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with quiet resolve. When the lawyer began presenting the will, the clauses, and Dad's intentions, the room fell into a heavy silence. He read aloud Dad's letters, words filled with hope, faith, and love for the family business and the home that had sheltered generations. The judge listened intently, nodding as the case unfolded clearly before everyone's eyes. Then came the moment that shattered the illusion James had tried so hard to maintain. The lawyer detailed the trust Dad had created, explaining how it protected the assets from being claimed by anyone who lacked the responsibility and dedication to honor the family legacy. James's face flushed red as murmurs filled the room. His entitlement was exposed, not just as greed, but as disrespect for everything Dad had built and believed in. When the verdict was announced, everything rightfully mine, I felt a wave of relief and triumph wash over me. But it wasn't the gloating victory I had imagined in those long nights of turmoil. Instead, it was a moment of quiet solemnity. I looked at James, standing there defeated, and felt something unexpected, a pang of sadness. This wasn't how I wanted our story to end. There's still a chance to make this right, I said softly. If you're willing to change, to honor Dad's memory with me, not against me. He looked away, swallowing hard. Whether he accepted or not, the door was open. Returning to the family home, my home now, I ran my fingers along the walls, feeling the echoes of the past and the promise of the future. The house, the business, and Dad's legacy were safe. But more than that, I had found my own strength, a reminder that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destruction, but justice served with kindness. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and the wounds wouldn't heal overnight. But I was ready. For Dad. For the family. For me. Months had passed since the courtroom battle. The wounds were still fresh, but the sharp edges were slowly softening, worn down by time and effort. The family home, once heavy with tension and silent arguments, was beginning to breathe again. I stood on the porch one crisp morning, sunlight filtering through the ancient oak trees that Dad had planted years ago. The house looked the same on the outside, but inside, everything had shifted. I wasn't just the owner anymore. I was the guardian of a legacy that had been forged in love, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. James hadn't come around yet. We exchanged polite words at family gatherings, but the distance between us lingered like a fragile thread, stretched thin by hurt and pride. Still, I held on to hope. Dad had taught me that family was worth fighting for. Not just with words or wills, but with patience and forgiveness. The business was thriving under my care. I poured my heart into it, not just for profit, but for the people who had trusted Dad and now trusted me. The employees, once skeptical, had become my allies, their respect hard, earned and deeply cherished. In the evenings, I often found myself sitting in Dad's old study, the same room where he had confided his hopes and fears. I kept his letters close, a reminder that strength wasn't loud or brash. It was steady, kind, and unwavering. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd catch a glimpse of James's shadow in the hallway or hear the faint echo of his laughter. And I knew that the story wasn't over. Not yet. But I was ready for whatever came next. Because this wasn't just about inheritance or revenge anymore. It was about healing wounds, building bridges, and finding the courage to write a new chapter, together or apart. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. The house was quieter now, but the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the possibilities of healing. Months had passed since the verdict, but the fractures within the family remained. James still held onto his bitterness, and I could feel the weight of his absence in every room, where his laughter once echoed. One afternoon, as I walked through the business offices, I overheard a conversation between two employees talking about James. They said he was struggling, angry, isolated, and unsure of what his future held without the inheritance he'd claimed as his birthright. Despite everything, a part of me ached for him. This was my brother, after all, the person who had been my fiercest rival, but also my closest kin. The man who had once been my best friend and worst enemy. That evening, I sat down with the letters Dad had written. His words reminding me that family wasn't just about ownership or legacy. It was about forgiveness, understanding, and the willingness to grow beyond past mistakes. The next day, I drafted a letter to James, not as a challenge or demand, but as an olive branch. I told him that the door was open, not just to share the business or the house, but to rebuild what had been broken. Weeks passed with no response. Then, one rainy evening, there was a knock on the door. Standing there was James, tentative, unsure, but willing to take a first step. Our conversation was awkward at first, laden with old wounds and cautious hope. We talked about the past, the hurt, and the future. Slowly, the walls we had built began to crumble. Reconciliation wouldn't be easy, It wouldn't erase the pain or the battles fought, but it was a start, a chance to transform betrayal into understanding and revenge into healing. As we stood together in the fading light, I realized that this was the true legacy Dad had wanted us to protect. Not just a business or a house, but a family made stronger through trials and forgiveness. And with that realization, I finally felt the weight of the past begin to lift.